Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights, and I focus on both relationship and natal astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to see more content from me, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel. Also consider clicking the notifications bell if you want to see when I will post a new video. Also, if you are interested in a private reading, I do readings in astrology on a variety of topics ranging from relationship readings to career to transits for 2-3 years, or solar return charts or predictions for 1 year, etc. You are free to email me at the email address that I will leave in the video description, and I can send you a pricing list and reading options and any other details that you might require. Also, I want to mention that I have started membership options on this channel, and the short of it, just to give you the short perks that you will get if you choose to join the membership section, you will get 1 extra video per month for each membership stage or tier. So for the first tier, you will get 1 extra video per month. For the second tier, you will get 2 extra videos per month, so you will have access to level 1 and level 2 videos. And for level 3 or third tier, you will get 3 extra videos per month. The level 1 and level 3 videos are going to be on a variety of topics, so basically anything related to astrology, but it will be content that is not shown on my regular usual videos, right? So this is members only exclusive content, and it can range from, tips and tricks on how to read a horoscope to, I haven't done this yet, but I plan on doing maybe members only astrological synastry for famous couples, for instance, or the analysis of famous people's horoscopes, but then I can also get into divisional charts, etc., etc. So all kinds of things. The level 1 or second tier of membership options is especially related to synastry astrology topics, meaning relationship-oriented astrology. So this could be things like how to discover which kind of partner archetype is right for you according to your horoscope, or it could be, again, different characteristics, whether you're going to have a good marriage according to your horoscope or a less than stellar marriage. But you can find more concrete examples in the lists that you will find in the video description, because I have added the playlists where you can already see all the videos that I have posted in each members section. So yeah, you can see what videos you will have access to from the ones that I have already done. But I will continue to post, like I said, 1 extra video per month for each level of membership. And in addition to that, in the members only section, you will have access to members only polls, and you will also have priority when it comes to getting your comments replied to on my channel. And you will also have stickers that basically show up next to your username that show that you are a member, and a couple of exclusive emojis. All right, so that's pretty much all the perks that you can have as a member on my channel. If you're curious, you can check the video description for more details as well, or you can click the join button under any of my videos to also see the prices, because the prices will be shown in your local currency. All right, in addition to the members only section, I also have a tarot channel, and I post there semi-regularly, and I will be linking the tarot channel in the video description as well as in the pinned comment. It's called Martine's Tarot. So if you are curious about tarot, if you're into it, maybe check out my channel, maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening to this intro. And now I'm going to get straight into today's topic. Hello and welcome to my channel. Welcome to another video from me. So today's topic is going to be on a very important, and I know based on previous videos that I've made, highly requested subject, and it is the topic of how can you see whether you're going to have a successful slash famous husband or wife, or in other words, spouse, right? It's a very simple technique. For those of you who have been members for a while, also thank you very much for being members on my channel. You probably remember that I have posted a video connected to this topic before, where I talked about how the fourth house in the D1 can illustrate quite a bit about, give quite a bit of details about the spouse's professional life. And it's very much connected to that topic. I'm not going to focus on the general meanings of all the different ways that the fourth house could show different career trajectories. I'm specifically going to be focusing on the topic of whether this person is going to be wealthy and or famous and or successful. So for those of you who are interested, of course, in finding out more details, I'm also going to be linking the members only video in case you are interested. And moving into this topic, it's very simple. It doesn't require any advanced astrology, not at least when it comes particularly to this topic of seeing whether you're going to have a wealthy, a successful partner. You only have to look at the D1 chart or the natal chart, and you only have to look at the fourth house and the third house mainly. So I'm actually going to divide it into two main sections, okay? So first, tackling the subject of successful spouse, quote unquote. Now, let me define what I mean by successful. When you are thinking about how successful the spouse is, you always have to look at it from the perspective of the person's horoscope, right? So if you're reading this for yourself, you have to think about what your level of success is, and then think about the fact that if you have a connection between these houses, your spouse is going to be very likely more successful than you. If you already are successful, pretty successful by social standards, at the very least, the spouse is going to be on the same level as you are. This is what I have seen time and time again with these configurations. I actually, once again, was reminded of this topic recently when I did a reading for an acquaintance of mine, and I noticed that she had this configuration, and it really matches the kind of partner that she has. And now you might be thinking, what the hell are you talking about? Why the fourth house and the third house? So again, really simple. If you take the seventh house of the natal horoscope to be an ascendant, not your ascendant, but an ascendant, more specifically, the spouse's ascendant, right? Why? Because the seventh house is the house of the spouse. So if you try to, put yourself in the perspective of the spouse, your seventh house can be seen as their ascendant, their lagna. So if you look at it from the perspective of your seventh house becoming the spouse's ascendant, then your fourth house from your D1 becomes the spouse's 10th house. And your third house from the D1 becomes the spouse's 9th house. It's as simple as that. That's pretty much the general theory. So why the 9th house? And now, obviously, the 10th house is the house of career. For those of you who, again, have watched a lot of my channels, or you're an intermediary in astrology at least, you know the 10th house is very much connected to the professional sphere, right? What is the person's career? What is the person's livelihood, social status, all of that stuff, right? So in your natal horoscope, your 10th house would show your career. In the spouse's horoscope, the fourth house, in your horoscope as well, not the spouse's horoscope, but from the spouse's perspective, right? So again, if you were to redraw your chart and take your 7th house sign as the ascendant, and then put all the other planets in their respective signs, You basically get a kind of a horoscope for the spouse. And you can use this for a bunch of things, but I have found it to be very relevant, especially on this topic of checking out the partner's potential career. And now, the ninth house in general, so in theory, the ninth house has to deal with blessings. So, ninth house is about luck. And this is why when you see a connection between the ninth and the 10th houses, technically, even in a person's natal horoscope, right, the person will tend to have a good amount of success, especially when they're going through the dashas or antardashas of those planets that are sitting in those houses or that are ruling those houses, that are somehow, influencing those houses. They're going to be going through a phase of success. Sometimes if the ninth house lord is strongly connected to the 10th house and it's a very strong connection, this is lifelong success, right? Depending on what else is going on in that particular horoscope. So that being said, very simply, if you have any kind of a connection between the spouse's 9th house and 10th house, or you can look at it from your perspective, which would be your 3rd house and 4th house respectively, which would become the spouse's 9th house and 10th house. Again, if you take the descendant or the 7th house sign to be the spouse is ascendant. So if you see any kind of contact between these houses, it means that the person is going to be successful. And I've seen this time and again. It can range from fame. It can range from, actual fame. And of course, fame doesn't automatically mean worldwide fame. You would have to look again at a lot of other configurations and what else is going on there. I've talked about fame before, actually, in the horoscope. I talked about how you can also see whether a spouse is famous from other points of view. So if you look at nakshatras and a bunch of other things. But with this very simple configuration check, you can get a pretty good idea. I mean, you're going to see with the examples that I have found that it's amazing what it shows, all right? And so 9th house and 10th house connections from the perspective of your 7th house. So again, I'm going to keep confusing these two, so I'm just going to say that from now on, I'm just going to refer to it as 9th and 10th houses from the descendant. Okay? So, because those are going to be the 9th and 10th houses from your spouse's ascendant. So, when you see any kind of contact meaning 9th house lord in the 10th house, 10th house lord in the 9th house, 10th house and 9th house lords aspecting one another, even a single-sided aspect, right? Especially when it comes to single-sided aspects, especially when it's the 9th lord aspecting the 10th lord, or the 9th lord aspecting the 10th house, then you will see again, the spouse will tend to have good social status, a good amount of money, a good career, basically, with a full package of everything that entails. Usually that's a good amount of money, a good amount of social status, and yeah, that's pretty much like money and social status, success. So being recognized, that's what it means, being recognized for their professional activities. And this is about success in general. So when you see a connection between the 9th and 10th houses from your descendant, you will see that the spouse has a good amount of success, in one word. And like I said, this could range from, world fame to just being, I don't know, the best waiter at their restaurant that gets the most tips and everybody likes or something. It could be that, okay? It could also involve wealth, but it's not the only connection that shows wealth. What I have seen a lot, actually, and I've seen this through reading a lot of horoscopes. I don't know if I'm going to actually see this in the examples that I found, because with the examples, I've mainly looked at whether there is a connection between the 9th and 10th houses from the descendant. So that was the main thing that I looked for with the examples that I looked for. But what I have also noticed through a lot of readings is, for instance, when you see a person who has quiet wealth, meaning people may not necessarily see the spouse of this person as being someone who's very successful necessarily. Maybe they're not particularly famous. Maybe they come across as pretty unassuming in public. They might even be introverted, not particularly popular. But the person is loaded, you know. Believe me, I've seen this a lot, right? So they could have a lot of wealth, okay, but maybe they don't have a high profile career, or they don't, yeah, they just don't have a lot of visibility. Maybe they're just very discreet, hush hush about everything, and also they could not show their wealth at all, right? It's only when you know the details of this person that you actually start to realize, oh, wait a minute, this person has married someone who's wealthy or is in a relationship, a long-term relationship with someone who's wealthy. And this configuration has to deal with the second house, aka the eighth house from your regular lagna or ascendant. So the eighth house from your ascendant, the eighth house of your natal horoscope, becomes the second house of the spouse, right? Again, if you take the seventh house sign as the spouse's lagna or ascendant, the eighth house becomes their second house. Your eighth house becomes their second house. So the second house, of course, is savings and wealth. There are other wealth houses, but this is the one that I've seen most prominently. All right. Now, I'm not saying that other houses don't also contribute. There are some typical wealth houses out there. So the second, the ninth, the 11th, those are the most typical wealth houses. Those could also play a part. But the second house, I have seen this a lot. So when you see combinations between the person's second house, so again, second house from the descendant, and their 10th house from their descendant, they have a spouse that has a good amount of wealth. Whether that spouse is socially successful or has a high profile career or not. So there it is. That is the general theory. Now, there might be a few details that, again, I'm going to be reminded of as I go along with reading the examples. Because I have to be honest, because I didn't have a lot of time, I have basically just looked through my database right now, and I just basically pulled out every famous person's horoscope that I could find, and I found quite a lot of interesting information just from these random examples, like without particularly looking into it. You're gonna see it's very telling. All right. So that being said, let me start. I'm going to get straight into the examples. So first example, just for you to see how completely random these examples are, because like I said, I just skimmed through my database of famous people's horoscopes and just pulled out random horoscopes. The first horoscope that I pulled out is Marie Curie. Okay, and this is because I'm still working on that. As I have mentioned previously on my community posts, I am working on some research connected to genius and intellect in the natal horoscope, and I hope to be posting that video at some point in the not too far away future, but I'm still working on information. So Marie Curie, all right, was an example that I had. For those of you who don't know, she was a Nobel Prize winner, and she worked alongside her husband. And actually, as far as I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, they actually won the Nobel Prize together. So both of them very highly successful, intelligent chemists, right, who worked in research, got very recognized. She became the first Nobel Prize winning woman in the history of mankind, in the history of the Nobel Prize, right? And if you look at her horoscope, all right, what do you see? Fourth house. So this is a North Indian style chart. Some of these, by the way, most of these actually are going to be the Western typical style of horoscope. But again, sorry for opening a parenthesis already, but I've had a lot of people in the comments ask me what kind of a horoscope do you use, and how come you use the round style charts. You need to understand that it doesn't matter how you draw the chart, which style it is. Even the round style charts that I show, they're set to show in sidereal zodiac, and the Lahiri Ayanamsha, for those of you who want to get more in depth, and it's the whole sign system. So it doesn't really matter how you draw them, whatever you feel comfortable with. I feel comfortable with either of these styles because I've learned both of them very well. So bear with me, all right? I know some people have preferences for either or, but this is the North Indian style. So for those of you who don't know, maybe the ascendant sign is shown by number 9, which is actually Sagittarius. So it's the square right on top there in the middle, the top middle section that has the number 9 in red. That is the first house, okay? And then you move counterclockwise, right? The second house with the number 10, that is the second house in Capricorn. Third house is the one with the number 11, and that is the third house in Aquarius, and so on and so forth. So the fourth house in her case, which would be again the 10th house from her descendant, is falling in Pisces. It's sitting there on the left side with, it also has Neptune in it, sorry, but I'm not looking at Neptune. I don't look at Neptune and Uranus in general when it comes to readings, but again, closing the parenthesis. So the fourth house there sitting in Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is sitting in the third house, her third house, right? So again, it's the third house from her Lagna, but it's the 9th house from her descendant, or her 7th house sign, which is Gemini, right? So basically, let me put it in a different way, maybe if there are still confusions about this. If you look at the horoscope the way that it is right now, picture just flipping the chart over, right? And instead of seeing it from the perspective of Sagittarius as the first house, you turn Gemini into the first house. And then you just arrange the rest of the planets in exactly the same signs that they are in, right? So you don't change the planets or recalculate anything. You simply look at the horoscope as if Gemini were the ascendant, or the Lagna, as it's called in Vedic astrology, right? So that becomes the ascendant of the spouse. And then when you look at it like that, basically her 4th house, which is in Pisces, now becomes the spouse's 10th house. All right? So very strong connection already. 10th house going into the 9th house. 10th house Lord going into the 9th house is a very, very strong connection. Definitely shows a highly successful spouse. Not only that, but she also has Moon and Jupiter together, a Gajkesri yoga, very strongly placed there in her 3rd house, right? And also in the 9th house from the descendant, which again really gives you a sense of how high profile her spouse would be. Another example is Brad Pitt. All right, this time it's a Western style chart, but again, if you look at the description, it's still sidereal, it's still whole sign. So it's still Vedic astrology, it's just a different style of drawing of the chart. So if you look at his 4th house, which again would be the 10th house from his 7th house, therefore the house that indicates the spouse's professional path and trajectory and whatnot, it's falling in Aquarius. That means that the 10th house from the descendant is ruled by Saturn and Rahu. Now, where is Saturn placed? That's right, it's placed in Capricorn. Capricorn, which happens to be in the 9th house from the descendant. Again, very strong connection between the 10th and the 9th houses from the descendant. Obviously, Brad Pitt dated almost exclusively very high-profile women. So women who were very successful. His 2 wives were definitely very successful. I would argue just as successful as he was, if not even more, definitely with Angelina Jolie. So it definitely checks out. I don't feel like I have to add anything extra here. I've actually checked this as a parenthesis. I don't have her horoscope saved in my database anymore, but you can check it actually in the video where I have talked about the relationship analysis in general between Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. I'm going to be linking that in the video description if you want to check it out. You can see their horoscopes there as well. So out of curiosity, I checked Angelina Jolie's chart to see if she also has a connection between the 10th and the 9th houses from the descendant, and nope, does not look like it, which I think is, in her case, pretty telling, because even when you consider the fact that she has dated a lot of high-profile men, none of them have actually been as successful and as famous as she has been. So it makes sense. Even though they were famous, they were successful, she was always the one who got the most publicity in the relationship. So just in case you want to check out of curiosity, so I'm not going to pull out her chart anymore, but you can see this again. Like I said, you can also check her horoscope in the video that I did on their relationship that I will be linking in the video description. She has 4th house, so again, the 4th house would be the 10th from the 7th house, indicating the spouse's career, falling in Libra, right, so ruled by Venus. And then she has the 9th house from the spouse falling in Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury. And her Mercury is in Taurus, and her Venus is in Cancer. So there is no strong aspect between these two. Not any kind of an aspect, actually, if you think of it from the perspective of traditional Vedic astrology. But yes, I think that is really telling in her case. Moving on, okay, to another chart that I have pulled up. And bear in mind, some of these are examples in the positive sense, and some of them are examples in the negative sense. In the sense that with some people, you see the connection between the 9th and the 10th houses, and it shows that they have had partners that were at least as successful, if not even more successful than they were. And then with people that don't have this connection, you tend to see the opposite, right? So they have partners that are not as successful as they are, or don't have as much money as they have. And now with the money, it's a little bit trickier. Like I said, I think with respect to the money, you would have to check other configurations more in depth, especially, and also check for that 2nd house that I talked about in the introduction. However, when it comes strictly to social status, to fame, this is how you want to look at it, right? So people who have a contact between the 9th and the 10th houses from the 7th house, they tend to have spouses that are more successful than they are. People that don't have a contact whatsoever between these two tend to have spouses that are not as successful as they are. A negative example, quote unquote, meaning someone who does not have a contact between the 9th and the 10th houses, is Donald Trump. So if you look at his horoscope, the 4th house, which is again the 10th from the 7th house, is falling in Scorpio. The moon is there, and it's ruled by Mars and Ketu. And now the 9th house from the 7th house is falling in Libra. He has Ketu in the 4th house itself. Sorry, in the 10th from the descendant. Sorry, I'm going to keep repeating. I'm going to keep calling them the 10th from the 7th and the 9th from the 7th. I'm not going to go back to which houses they are from the D1 because it gets confusing. All right. So he has Ketu in the 10th house from the descendant. So it's not touching Venus in any way, because actually it is touching Venus in a single-sided aspect. So Ketu is sitting in the 10th house from the descendant in Scorpio. It is aspecting Venus by 9th aspect. However, what you want to bear in mind is that Venus is ruling the 9th house, Ketu is ruling the 10th house. Remember what I said in the introduction? It's usually, again, as far as I have seen at least, that you see the success of the spouse being particularly prominent when it's the 9th house lord aspecting the 10th house or the 10th house lord. not so much the other way around. Not to say that Donald Trump did not date high profile women. They were definitely high profile, but again, compared to him, not really on the same level. So anyway, back to the horoscope, right? Ketu in the 10th from the 4th house, from the 7th house, sorry, in Scorpio, aspecting Venus, which is the lord of the 9th house from the 7th house, which is sitting in Libra. And Mars, let me see. Mars is sitting in Leo, all right? So Mars and Venus are not making any kind of an aspect whatsoever. So what you see in this case is, again, very telling. You don't see an aspect from the 9th lord to the 10th lord. You see an aspect from the 10th lord to the 9th lord. And there's a difference there, right? Because, again, if the 9th lord gives a single-sided aspect to the 10th lord or the 10th house itself, okay, so like if, for instance, in this case, he had Venus in Taurus looking at the 10th house from the descendant, that would have been a pretty strong aspect on the house of the spouse's career, right? The 10th from the 7th. But he doesn't have that, right? So in this case, basically, the 9th lord is not giving its blessings to the career of the spouse, right? That's the main idea. The 9th house is the house of blessings. It is the one that creates the most luck, the most success, the most blah, 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 right? So, yeah, but you do have a 10th to the 9th here, all right? Moving on to another example. Oh, this one I have to... Okay, I was going to leave it for last, but I'm going to do it in the order that I have them saved here because otherwise I know myself and I'm going to forget about it. This one is quite the example. I was actually saving it, and now that I look through my database of horoscopes, I just remembered that I was going to do a video about this topic as well, but it sort of trickled down to the bottom of my consciousness and I stopped thinking about it probably months ago. But I was going at some point, well, multiple times throughout the past probably 20 years of my life, I went on binges of watching serial killer documentaries and all this nonsense. I eventually stopped because it's a very grim subject, obviously. But the last time that I was watching some of these shows, I came across this guy that was just unbelievable. And I was gonna do this about men who abuse women for money. I was gonna do a video about this. So again, if you want to see this, comment it in the comment section because I want to see how many people want to watch it because it is a pretty grim topic, to be honest. But I feel like also it's worth doing. People should be warned. Women should be warned, especially because there are some patterns with these kinds of men. Anyway, I came across this guy named Harold Henthorn. You can Google him. So you can see his name written on the horoscope there in the upper left corner. In parentheses, I literally wrote wife killer because that's exactly what he is. And this guy is, I don't know if you have watched that TV series, The Ladder. Ironically, that guy, I remember looking for that guy's horoscope, but I don't think he had a time of birth. I don't even know how I came across this guy's horoscope, but I hope it's correct. And considering the stuff that is showing up in his horoscope, I think it is correct because it's really describing his situations in life. Anyway, right? If you've seen that movie, I think it was called The Ladder with Colin Firth and Toni Collette. That one is also based on a true story of a guy who basically killed I don't even know if he was convicted eventually. I think he was convicted, actually. He killed two of his wives, like, at 2 decades apart by pushing them down a stair. And this guy, he actually had 2 different ways in which he killed his wives, but he also had 2 wives that he murdered for money, basically, especially the second one. I don't remember the full story, but again, you can do a simple Google search. You can find all the nitty-gritty details. It's really creepy and depressing. But the bottom line is, the reason I looked into this guy is because, again, this is a guy who married women for money. And now, if you look at his horoscope, you will notice that he doesn't have any contact between the tenth house from the descendant and the ninth house from the descendant, right? Meaning Aries and Pisces, respectively. Those are the houses that I'm talking about. So, 10th house from the descendant, in his case, is sitting in Aries. Ninth house from the descendant is sitting in Pisces. The lord of the 10th house from the descendant is Mars. The lord of the ninth house from the descendant is Jupiter. And if you look at his horoscope, Mars is sitting in Virgo, Jupiter is a Leo. There's no connection between these two planets, all right? Actually, hold on. Stop it. Why did I not pay attention? There is a connection. There is a connection here. And that is Mars is giving a single-sided... Wait, no, scratch it again. So I did check these horoscopes beforehand, but again, I always double-check myself just to make sure. So, there is a connection. So Jupiter, which is the lord of the ninth house, right? Jupiter's ruling Pisces, is aspecting the 10th house by, by ninth aspect. So there is a connection there. His wives were more successful than him. Not only that, the most important part here is the wealth aspect. So he does also have the success aspect of the spouse, but the second house, okay? So if you look at Cancer here, which is his descendant, meaning the sign opposite the ascendant, if you look at it as the lagna of the spouse, what do you see in the second house? Jupiter and Leo, all right? So Leo is the sign that is ruling the second house from the spouse. And now if you look at the sun, it's sitting in Libra opposite the 10th house from the spouse, which is Aries. I know it's a lot of mental gymnastics, but bear with me. If you follow what I'm saying, you will clearly see it. So in other words, there is a contact. First of all, there is a contact between the 9th from the spouse and the 10th from the spouse. Then there's also a contact between the 2nd from the spouse and the 10th from the spouse. So clearly indicating that his spouse is going to be better off financially, well off, and also better. They definitely would have been better off without him. Can I just say that? But they were more well off than he was. All right. And unfortunately, he was predatory about that. Now, of course, these particular configurations will not show anything about whether you're going to attract a predatory spouse or anything, or whether you're going to try to be a predator towards a spouse that would have more money. Those things would have to be seen through other things in this horoscope. And I'm going to save this one for later. Like I said, at some point, I hope to make that more in-depth video that I was talking about men who are predatory in a psychopathic way, like target women for money and try to use them that way. Because this is not the only guy that I looked into like this. There's another guy in my, that from the UK that had a similar pattern, and there's also the guy with the staircase. There's a bunch of these types, by the way. Unfortunately, humanity doesn't lack psychopaths. But anyway, if you would be curious to see more on this topic, again, please comment in the comment section. Moving on to another example that I had in my database, James McAvoy, the actor. I have actually looked a little bit. So I had his horoscopes saved for other purposes. Again, like I said, I didn't have time to specifically do, like right now, a specific list of famous people just for this topic. But I had his horoscope in my database because, I don't know, I think I looked into his career or something at some point out of curiosity. And just out of sheer curiosity, I checked to see what his spouse situation is. And he's married to this woman. I think her name is Liberty something or Liberace. It's not Liberace. She is she's not an actress. She's a costume designer, as far as I understood. Hold on, let me check her name. Lisa Liberati. Okay, so this is his current spouse, and then before that, I think before that he also had another spouse who was not particularly famous either. So his wife is not exactly unsuccessful, right? Because if you do a little bit of research into her, I think she's like a co-founder of a fashion brand. She's a costume designer that won some awards. So she's not like totally unsuccessful or something, and it's not like she hasn't achieved anything in her life or something. But again, if you compare it to his career, she's not in the same league, let's be honest. So he's definitely the one who is way more successful, and I think arguably definitely the wealthier one, unless she comes from a rich family. I don't know, haven't done that much research, but at least from the eyes of society, he's the one that has the higher level of success in this relationship. So if you look at his horoscope, okay, 10th from the descendant, again, is in Scorpio. And you see Rahu is in there in Scorpio as well. Now, Mars and Ketu are the rulers of Scorpio. Ketu is sitting in the 10th house, or the 4th house from the spouse. Okay, I'm gonna keep looking at it from the spouse's ascendant perspective. So Ketu is falling in Taurus, let me put it like that. Venus is the lord of the 9th from the spouse, and Venus is sitting in the 2nd from the spouse. Holy shit, now that I look at this, she might be a rich heiress. I mean, that is a contact between the 9th from the descendant and the 2nd from the descendant. Pretty strong contact between two wealth houses. So I wouldn't be surprised if she actually had more money than he does. But, okay, looking at it again strictly from the fame perspective, Venus, right, the lord of the 9th from the descendant, is sitting in Pisces, and Ketu is sitting in Taurus, which again is one of the lords of the 10th from the descendant. Mars is sitting in Cancer, which again is one of the lords of the 10th from the descendant. So my point being that there are no contacts between Ketu and Venus. So Ketu is in Taurus, Venus is in Pisces. There are also no contacts between Venus and Mars, unless you want to, break the rules a little bit and look at it from the tropical perspective and say that they're in a trine. But in this respect, I haven't looked into tropical aspects. I know that sometimes I use them in synastry, but this is a totally different thing. And I stick to the traditional Vedic aspects for this one. So from what I see, there is no aspect between the 9th and the 10th from the descendant. However, like I said, I mean, now that I noticed that 9th to 2nd lord connection, I wonder what kind of wealth this woman has, Anyway, maybe James has struck gold. Or maybe he just has a gambling problem and, she's smart with investing, in which case the fact that he makes millions of dollars and she makes a lot less would not even count. She would probably still surpass him in wealth. Anyway, digressing. I haven't looked into whether she's wealthy or not, so I don't know if you guys want to research it. It would be great if you could share it for everyone in the comment section. Would be fun to check. Moving on. Right, so either way, the point being, no contact between the 9th and the 10th, meaning she's definitely not as successful as he is. Alright, so again, moving on. Joanne Woodward. Alright, so one of my favorite couples. Again, those of you who have watched my channel for a long time, you know that I constantly mention this couple because they were one of the most long-lasting marriages in Hollywood. I think maybe the most long-lasting. I don't know exactly. Definitely one of the most long-lasting, all right? So Joanne Woodward, who married Paul Newman. Now, if you look at her horoscope, you see that the 10th from the 7th house is in Aries. It has Rahu in there. The 9th from the 7th house is in Pisces. No planets in there. So the lord of the 10th from the descendant, or the 7th house, is Mars. and Mars is in Capricorn. And the lord of the ninth from the seventh house is Jupiter. Jupiter is in Taurus. So here we have a very clear and clean, nice aspect between the lord of the ninth house and the lord of the 10th house. More specifically, again, unlike the Donald Trump situation where you had the 10th lord aspecting the 9th lord, here you have it the other way around. So the 9th lord, Jupiter, is making a single-sided aspect to Mars, which is sitting in Capricorn and is the lord of the 10th house. So here we have the lord of the 9th house blessing the career of the spouse. And obviously Joanne Woodward did marry a very successful, very acclaimed actor. And definitely someone who is more successful than she is. Was more successful than she was. Okay. Now let's look at it from the other side. Luckily, I had both of their horoscopes saved in my database. Let's look at it from Paul Newman's side, right? The spouse's side. And what do we see in his chart? Fourth house. Okay, I keep going back and forth between these. I have to stay fixated on calling it the 10th house. Okay, it's the 4th house in the natal horoscope, but it's the 10th house from the descendant, or the 7th house, meaning it's the 10th house in the spouse's horoscope. So the 10th house in the spouse's horoscope is falling in Pisces. The 9th house is falling in Aquarius. The lord of the 10th house is Jupiter. The lords of the 9th house are Rahu and Saturn. Jupiter is in Capricorn. You see it there conjunct the sun. And let's see, it's not aspecting either Rahu or Saturn. It is, you might be tempted, at least some people might be tempted, to say that, oh, it is aspecting Rahu because it's opposite. No, it's not. All right, because once it's, when it comes to the Rahu Ketu, oppositional pool, right? Because Rahu and Ketu are always opposite. When you have a planet opposite Rahu, it's always conjunct Ketu. So it's no longer being influenced by Rahu, it's mainly influenced by Ketu. You can't really say that it aspects Rahu exactly. It's a bit more complicated, but I have talked about this in many other videos. So anyway, Jupiter is not aspecting Rahu, it's conjunct Ketu and the sun. And it's also not aspecting Saturn, because the only aspects that Jupiter can make are either opposition, 5th, or 9th from itself, meaning the signs that are in trine, right? So if Jupiter is sitting in Capricorn, it can only aspect planets in Taurus or Virgo. Or if they are in Cancer, but as long as they're not Rahu or Ketu, because then it's conjunct the opposite. So no aspect from Jupiter to Saturn or Rahu. But if you look at it from the 9th lord perspective, so Saturn is aspecting Jupiter. So Saturn is in Scorpio, which means it aspects anything that is 3 houses away from itself. So it's aspecting Jupiter by 3rd aspect. Saturn is in Scorpio, aspecting Jupiter in Capricorn. So here we have another case again of 9th house lord aspecting the 10th house. So this one is kind of, to be honest, again, I'm not like very well documented with respect to these actors' careers, but as far as I know, at least, Paul Newman was definitely more successful. However, I think when they got together, I know that Joanne Woodward was also an actress, and I think when they got together, they were pretty much around the same level of success. I think so. Can't be 100% sure, but especially since they got married, in the time of the Jurassic, I think they got married when they were very young. So Paul Newman became successful later in their marriage. But I think when they got married, they actually were around the same level of social status slash success, right? Either way, both of them have a connection between the ninth and the 10th houses, especially the ninth lord aspecting the 10th house lord, which again would tend to show a high profile, successful partner. All right, moving on to another example. Oh, this is a big one. Princess Diana. Unfortunately, I don't also have Prince Charles's horoscope done, but I'm gonna briefly check to see, just for the sake of science, after I'm done with Princess Diana. I'm gonna check to see if Prince Charles also had something going on in his horoscope. So, Princess Diana, all right. If you look at, again, the 10th house from the 7th is in Aquarius. It has moon in there. The 9th house from the 7th is in Capricorn. And it has Saturn and Jupiter. You already see very clearly what the connection is, okay? Here we have a very strong connection because the 10th lord, which is Saturn, one of the 10th lords, because in her case, being an Aquarius, the 10th house being an Aquarius, it has two lords. It has Rahu and Saturn. So one of them, Saturn, is sitting in the 9th house. Very strong connection, okay? Very high profile, very successful spouse. It's also conjunct Jupiter, which furthermore emphasizes all of that. And if I am not mistaken, let me double check this just to make sure. Yep, I just checked it. So both her Saturn and her Jupiter are in Uttarashadha, which I think in her case is very, very telling. I did say I wasn't going to get into nakshatras, but this one I had to point it out because it's very telling. So Uttarashadha, which is ruled by the sun, all right? Sun, which represents monarchies and royalty and leadership and government and all that, right? So it's even more telling in her case when you get into details about the kind of spouse that she has had. Very strong connection, and yeah, I think that's already strong enough, basically. Let me see if there's any other connection. We have Rahu in Leo, so Rahu's sitting in the 4th house, actually, from the spouse. This would actually be, again, a bit more telling because I think out of the two of them, she was definitely the one who was more high profile, so it makes sense that his career was in the 4th house, which is patriotism, tradition, history. Makes a lot of sense. But okay, not getting too much into it. I said I was going to stick to, the basics here. Another thing that I have to point out, Holy Mother of Christ over here, is that his 2nd house, right? So actually his 2nd house, because it's her 8th house, right? The 2nd house from the descendant, meaning Gemini, sitting in Gemini, you see Sun with Mercury. So the Lord of the 2nd house is in the 2nd house, conjunct the Lord of the 4th house. Are you seeing this? Holy moly. Basically showing inherited properties, inherited wealth, particularly from the mother's side because of that 4th house connection. Either way, 2nd lord sitting in the 2nd house, very strong financial position of the spouse. There's also a contact between, speaking of the wealth aspect here, there's also a contact between the 9th and the 11th as well, the two money houses. So the 9th lord is Saturn, conjunct Jupiter, and it's aspecting Pisces. It's aspecting the 11th house from the spouse by 3rd aspect. So there's a lot of wealth coming from the spouse, a lot, because all of these, so we have all of the money houses basically are strong. So there's a strong connection between the 9th and the 11th, and then there's the second house being a very strong position, and also connected to the fourth house, showing real estate, inheritance, and money coming from the mother side of the family. Very telling for her spouse. But yeah, this is pretty much what I can see in a very short analysis. Moving on. Yes. So I've also looked into Charles's horoscope. Really don't have time to post it also, but you can very easily search for this information. All you have to do is look at what is his fourth house from the Lagna, or the ascendant, and the third house, and see what the connections are. So I can tell you, right, his Lagna is in Cancer. His fourth house is in Libra. The Lord of Libra, Venus, is sitting in Virgo. So the Lord of the 10th from the spouse, from the 7th house, is sitting in the 9th from the spouse. Very strong connection. Very, very strong, right? It's similar to, which was the previous, well, I had a bunch of these examples, right, with very famous spouses that had the 10th from the 7th house, Lord sitting in the 9th from the 7th house. Very strong aspect that shows a famous spouse, especially very famous, right? And yeah, definitely the level of fame that surpassed him, I think, in his case. So it's interesting to note in this case that both of them actually, wait, oh my god, I was like, what is the previous example? Yeah, the previous example, I think, was Diana herself. Yeah, exactly. So both of them, okay, it wasn't just Diana. I think there was someone else before. Anyway, both of them have the Lord of the 10th from the 7th house in their horoscope, sitting in the 9th from the 7th house, showing that both of them are very high profile, very successful, very famous people. Of course, from his perspective, that was a nuisance, as everyone remembers. Another example that I had in my database is Teal Swan. And, okay, provided that her time of birth is correct, of course. But I guess there's no reason why it wouldn't be. I don't think so. Anyway, if you look at her fourth house, or again, I have to keep correcting myself. I feel like I'm going to get a lot of confused questions about this, but I really apologize if I am confusing, but I feel like I explained everything pretty clearly in the introduction part of the video. So if you are in doubt, just listen to the introduction part again before I get to the examples. Anyway, so if you look at her 10th from the 7th, it's in Virgo. All right. So the 7th is in Sagittarius. 10th from the 7th is Virgo. So the Lord of the 10th from the 7th is Mercury. 9th from the 7th is Leo. The Lord of the 9th from the 7th is the Sun. And she has Mercury in Taurus, the Sun in Gemini. So there is no aspect. I know the tropical astrology people will want to turn this into a conjunction, but according to Vedic astrology, it is not a conjunction. I think I've mentioned this in some videos because people have asked about this. They've asked what if it's a very tight orb. I've said this, normally I only consider a conjunction out of sign, and it's only for the conjunction, not minor aspects. When there's a conjunction happening in the same nakshatra and it's no more than 2 degrees apart, right? So if you have, let's say, Moon in 29 degrees Aries in Kritika, and Mars in 1 degree Taurus in Kritika, I would still view that as having some level of impact and manifesting as a conjunction in the horoscope. But even in that case, it would not be a full-blown conjunction, because according to traditional Vedic astrology, if it's not in the same sign, it's not a conjunction. So that being said, in her horoscope, there's no connection between the 9th and the 10th houses from the 7th. However, if you look at the 2nd from the 7th house, it's in Capricorn. The Lord is Saturn. And Saturn is sitting in the 11th. In the 11th. From the 7th house. Very strong connection between the 2nd and the 11th houses from the spouse. If this were from the perspective of the D1 chart, right? So just looking at if this would happen from the ascendant, haven't checked if it does, by the way. But if it were to happen, it would be called a Dan yoga, right? So it's one of those yogas that are said to create high amounts of wealth. In her case, it shows that the spouses that she is going to have are pretty well off, but not particularly famous, which makes sense for her if you do a little bit of research. I haven't done like extensive research. I know she was married a bunch of times, I think like 4 or 5 times. I do know that one guy at least that she married was some kind of a wealthy businessman, because I remember that he showed up in one of her videos. Yeah, so I think, again, it's really telling. So this has been pretty much it. Again, these are the examples that I have found right off the top of my database. And I think they were all very telling. So I hope you have enjoyed the video. And of course, as usual, please comment in the comment section with what you think about this topic. Maybe check it for people that you know, couples that you know, see how it checks out. Please comment in the comment section. And also, if you have liked the video, of course, don't forget to like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed already. It's the easiest way to support me, and it is free. Also, consider clicking on the notifications bell if you want to be notified when I post a new video. And if you're interested in a personal consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. You can check out the email that I will leave in the video description, so you can email me for a pricing list and reading options and any other details. I don't spam anyone, because I've had some people comment like, why don't I make like a public video about my services? I don't feel comfortable doing that yet. Maybe at some point I will set up a website, but I don't feel right advertising my services. That's why I ask people to send me an email, but I never send like spam emails or anything like that, so don't worry about that if you're thinking that it's gonna happen. Aside from that, if you're interested, of course, in becoming a member, you can check out more details about what the membership sections entail. I've already posted a lot of videos in the membership sections, and you can check out more information about that in the introductory part to this video. You can also see the prices if you click on the join button under any of my videos. It will show you the prices for each membership tier in your local currency. And aside from that, last but not least, I also have a tarot channel, which I have started a lot more recently than this channel. And if you're curious about tarot, if you're interested, go ahead and check it out. I will leave it in the video description as well. Maybe subscribe to that channel. It would greatly be appreciated. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you at my next video. Bye!